Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the sixth edition of our ETCIO BFSI Digital Conclave. The theme for this edition is BFSI 2025 Strengthening Digital Connectivity. Now, when we talk about digital connectivity, security can never be the forgotten stepchild. In fact, it is of utmost importance in enabling, bolstering, and strengthening digital connectivity. Mindful of this fact, we have organized a panel discussion titled Rising Digital and Hidden Hackers. In this session, you will hear from some of the security leaders and industry experts on how they are rethinking their security posture to proactively monitor their environment, the tools and technologies they are employing to rapidly detect threats and accurately respond to it. I'm Sneha, editor of ETCIO and your moderator for this session. And I'm very pleased to welcome our illustrious set of panelists. They are T.R. Venkateswaran, CISO, Punjab National Bank; Kiran Belsekar, SVP and CISO, IT Governance, Aegon Life Insurance; Suchit Mishra, CIO and CISO, Dhani Loans; Prashant Deshpande, CISO, Shriram Transport Finance Company; and Jatin Gambhir, Country Business Head, Akamai. Gentlemen, welcome to the sixth edition of ETCIO BFSI Digital Conclave. Thank you for taking out time to be a part of this panel. Now, before we plunge headlong into the discussion, let me set a bit of context here. The BFSI sector is taking huge strides towards acceleration through digital connectivity. The more digital you become, the more exposed you are. The cloud is making your borders more porous, and online services, apps, and APIs are drawing out your defenses. The pandemic has not only accelerated the shift to digital, but has also highlighted a rush of cybercriminal sophistication and collaboration. It has offered them new opportunities to probe for weaknesses they can monetize and new ways to disguise their activity. Online criminals have reacted fast, adapting their approach to hunt out remote working security gaps and prey on the vulnerable. Moreover, the will and aggressiveness of well-organized cybercriminals has elevated to a point where incident responses are now met with counterattacks designed to punish and extract money from the victims via ransomware and other criminal activities to extract that final pound of flesh from the victim. It signals a new era of adversary sophistication. With that as the premise, let us dive right into the discussion. We'll start off with you, Mr. Venkateswaran. In the digital first scenario, banks are expanding the range of self-service options available to customers digitally for transactions, wealth management, mortgage, loan applications, etc. So ensuring robust security controls for these new customer functionalities is essential. How are you looking at creating safety nets for customers so they don't fall victim to a lot of security threats that are arising in this new normal?
Good afternoon to all. See, we have to divide the issue or the scenario into two parts. One is the cyber attacks. Okay, cyber attacks generally it is on the organizations or on the critical infrastructure. So there are various threat actors who are there who are working on it, and there will be various mechanisms which are put in place to minimize the impact of these attacks. These attacks will be there. Okay. So because of the changing scenario, because of digitalization, there will be more opening of the applications for integrations and interfaces with various ecosystem players. Okay, there may be fintechs, there may be other organizations, there may be payment gateways. Okay. The other part is in respect of these cyber frauds,
Mhm.
these are generally done using social engineering techniques and weak passwords, weak the OTP mechanism or the process flow is not complete, because of which these things happen. Okay, so the organizations, they take various steps. Let's take for instance in respect of the cyber attacks. Okay, organizations will be having a layered security. It will be for the endpoints. It will be for the servers. You will be having for the applications. You will be having for the web. You will be having security for the network. Okay, you will be having security for the mobile applications. Okay, there are various methodologies which are there. DDoS prevention systems are there. Intrusion prevention systems are there. There will be firewalls. There will be web application firewalls. There will be the DLPs to prevent the exfiltration of data. Okay. There will be access control mechanisms to prevent so that unpatched systems are not using the network.
Mhm.
There will also be various systems which there are also application whitelisting mechanisms through which whitelisted applications will function. Okay. We will be having the endpoint detection and response systems. We will be having the mail gateways. We will be doing various, we will also be conducting various exercises amongst the employees so that there is awareness about the cybersecurity preparedness, and the attacks like ransomware and this thing are minimized. We cannot fully prevent it, but we can minimize it by reducing the surface area and creating awareness about what is to be. The other aspect is in respect of the incident response. So when an incident happens, there is a need for a proper reporting. There are certain regulatory guidelines wherein they specify the reporting aspects. It has to be reported properly. The other aspect is the root cause analysis of these incidents ought to be identified, and wherever there are corrective actions required in the wherever it may be in the application, it may be in some configuration, it may be some patching. There will be various aspects to it which are to be taken care of immediately.
Right.
Okay. We will be doing some external audits also, so that generally these vulnerabilities are identified. Okay. There are also advisories which are coming from the organizations like CERTIN, RBI, or NCIAPC and all. They will be giving the advisories in respect of various indicators of compromise, which are to be blocked in our perimeter devices. And for this, there are certain automated tools which are emerging like SOAR, which will take care of the automated process for blocking these indicators of compromise. It may be URLs, it may be malicious IPs, it may be the hashes. There are various things which will be there in the indicators of compromise, which will get. But the problem, it is not that smooth. See, all these security solutions are there, but they are not. We cannot say that all these will prevent the attacks.
Right.
See, the security solutions also have to undergo a frequent improvement in the processes, in the methodology through which they are working. So that is why people are speaking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., in respect of security solutions.
Right.
Now the next this thing is, generally the organization will be having a security operations center where the same solution will be there. There will be an incident management system. There will be an incident handling system and alert generation mechanism, and it will be alerted to the respective people. There will be some dashboards to monitor these activities. Having said all these things, these are all from the centralized part. Okay, the bigger infrastructure, bigger organizations, all these things will be happening. But what is happening is there are some URLs which are sent by SMS. Okay, the fraudsters are using the same technologies to defraud the customers. Okay, They'll be using some OTP. They'll be using some SMS. They will see all this comes because of the greed of the people to make easy money. Okay, they will be promising some lottery, or they will be playing with the emotions of the people. Okay, they will be showing some urgency. The fraudsters will be showing some urgency in certain actions. Okay, saying that they are hospitalized, they need some money. Okay, like that, they will be showing some urgency, and based on which the customers, generally the bank customers, they share their OTP. Okay, there are mechanisms evolving, but still the awareness is there is need for improvement of the awareness. And then there are also certain things in the applications when we are developing the applications, various controls are to be put so that there is no scope for the hijacking or the man in the middle attacks on this data. Okay. Generally, if you see whatever is being reported are all attempts. Okay. Nobody is looking into the reality whether actually some data has gone out or not.
Right.
Okay. So the media also has to play its role so that there is a responsible reporting of things, so that there is the improvement is emerging in the cyber security implementations. Okay. See, for frauds, there is a cybercrime portal, there is a cyber ghost which is there. So the and the RBI also given a master direction on the digital payment ecosystem, digital payment system controls, wherein they are specified that there should be a mechanism to lodge complaint and there should be a smooth process flow so that there is online dispute resolution in respect of fraudulent transactions.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
or suspicious transactions. So these are all evolving, and it will take some time for these systems to stabilize so that the customers' money is safe. Okay, the entire objective is to prevent frauds. Okay, it may be some fraud management system, it may be some security operations center, it will be various security solutions. All our intention is to minimize the impact of frauds on the ecosystem.
Correct.
Thank you.
Right. So, Mr. Venkateswaran, you gave us a very overarching view of all the threat vectors that prevail in the BFSI sector, especially in banks, the kind of threats that you are seeing emerging in this new digital first era and which have been accentuated in the pandemic period. And you also spoke about some of the solutions that could be deployed and some of the technologies and the approaches that could be taken to remediate some of these threats. I'd like to move on to Mr. Belsekar. Mr. Belsekar, we have witnessed a radical change in the DDoS attack methodology, and it's now gone towards faster, hard-hitting, complex, multi-vector attacks that are expected to continue well into this post-pandemic period as well. So, with the increase in attack complexity and speed, how do you think organizations should build a robust threat intelligence to deal with such threats?
Thanks, Sneha, for having me on this panel along with such eminent co-panelists. And I also hope the audience watching us are also in a good health as well. So yeah, thanks for that question. So one thing which I wanted to take it is that all these breaches or these attacks is one thing we need to understand. These does not happen overnight. The execution happens in 3 to 4 stages. So the threat actors will look out for the information. It tries to snoop the information. Once it identifies which information to snoop, it will start porting the information out. And finally is the stage when they realize that they have a sufficient information and they feel that they can arrest the property, which will yield a good ransom. They go and arrest the property, and if the victims fails to pay the ransom, it is followed by the data exposure or the data sale in the dark markets. And that's the new modus operandi, which is followed by the ransomware groups. But saying this, while there can't be 100% security or a guarantee from cyber attacks, cyber attack free, when someone actually has a 0-day vulnerability detected. But the organizations can give an assurance to the board and to the management using their protection and detection layers from the perimeter edge locations to the endpoint perspective. So basically using the defense in depth security approach.
Right.
That's one aspect of it. In addition to the inside out visibility which organization have, which typically they get it by doing the vulnerability assessment or a penetration system, I think testing, they also need to implement the threat intelligence, which is basically an outside in security perspective, using the platforms like digital risk protection perspective. So that includes having a complete visibility from the attack surface management, the continuous data exposure monitoring, and the dark web intelligence perspective. This really helps the organizations to get the early warning or the threat signals about phishing domains, compromised users, exposed data in the third party data stores, and the open vulnerabilities in the environment. So the organizations can react faster and prevent to the breach before it occurs, I would say.
Right, right. Mr. Mishra, you heard Mr. Belsekar talk about some of the ways in which organizations can contain some of the threat and reduce the evidence of of a loss from cyber threats. So, what are some of the tips and tricks that you think organizations should employ to ensure that they are able to detect the threats faster while also maintaining the right balance between customer convenience and customer experience and also security, because customer experience and convenience should not be compromised at the cost of security in the digital age.
Yeah, hey everyone, thanks for having me on this panel. Really great to be here. That's a great question. And this is something that, of course, we all think about as security professionals and IT professionals. How do we balance the usability vis-a-vis the security aspects? And it's a constant challenge, as everybody can attest to. I think the way we look at it, at least in our context, is we try to not mandate a lot of friction in the user workflow by providing more intelligent, adaptive mechanisms, right? Where based on certain heuristics or parameters, like let's say the IP address of the individual, or let's say location, the phone. So we capture a lot of data, and then we use that data to be able to say, hey, do we suspect this to be a bot, or is this a actual human or a customer, right? And then based on those machine learning models, we are able to get to a better place in judging whether we add additional layer of friction in the user flow or we let it pass smoothly, right? So that's a smarter way of doing things, right? To give you a very concrete example, it's the CAPTCHA has been used everywhere. You go to any website, it asks you to go identify this red light, traffic light, or the bridges or whatever, right? It's not the most elegant way of engaging a user while he's trying to get his or her job done as part of your on your platform, right? So but if this user turns out to be a fraudster, then clearly it makes sense to annoy this person by interjecting this. But if it's not, then you can just let it pass, right? So I think, just to give you a concrete example, this is all based on the data, I think. And the more data you have around your ecosystem, your platform users, whether it's, like I said, location, IP address, device IDs, you should be able to make those decisions real time and make that a seamless experience, in my opinion.
Mr. Deshpande, so credential stuffing has become rampant in the BFSI sector, and we've seen many organizations struggle to regain the trust after falling victim to such attacks. How is your organization ensuring that customer login details are kept secure and digital trust is not compromised?
Yeah, thanks, Sneha, and thanks all the panelists. So yes, credential stuffing is a part today, has become a major threat actually, and I see one of the basic reason why this is um, happening is most of the users, in fact, as per the survey, 70%, 70 more than 70% users, okay, reuse the same password across the multiple online accounts. Okay, there is a major root cause, if you ask me. Okay, for their core applications, all other applications, they use same thing. And then to complement that, now we have got a lot of automation tools and the sophisticated tools available for the hackers to ensure that these attacks become a success. And as rightly mentioned by one of the panelists, we have got a tough job to do today. Okay, at one place, the core objective for our business is to ensure that the security should not impact the customer experience and the revenue of the organization. On the other hand, okay, we want security should be implemented and it should avoid all the hacking efforts. Okay, if you ask me what we have done and what is the most effective way of doing these things is, I'll just answer in short. Okay, the first and most important I feel is the multi-factor authentication. Okay, is a must to use, wherever is possible. The best example, as you mentioned, of the captcha, it impacts the customer experience, but at the same time, additional layer of security it's at. Okay, then there are other tools which can be used, which automatically detect the brute force attacks. Even there are tools in the market which have implemented recently, detection of the bots. Okay, and wherever possible, if we have a control with the admin and if you have a data of the breached user accounts, okay, it's best way to protect those things. So I feel these are 3-4 things we should ensure to minimize the impact of credential stuffing.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Deshpande. Mr. Venkateswaran, I'd quickly like to move on to you before I, pose this question to Jatin. In your previous response, you spoke about a very interesting, change that's happening in the BFSI sector, and it's around opening up of the ecosystem, where you're partnering with fintechs, big techs, and various other digital partners. So applications and APIs have also become a popular target for attackers worldwide, and this continues to be growing problem for the banks. What measures do you have in place to protect against these attacks? Very quickly, if you could tell me, what are some of the key steps you've taken in this direction?
Generally, application programming interface controls are emerging. Okay. The minimum controls which will be looked at will be the authentication mechanisms between the two servers. Okay. One is we have to authenticate from where the data is coming, or the request is coming, or the response is going. Okay. So that is one aspect. So there will be some digital certificates which are to be put in place, or in certain things you may also look at a HSM. Okay. There are some data security standards which are emerging. Okay, PCI DSS data security standards are there. They are emerging for these areas. Okay. The other aspect is the data will be encrypted. When we are communicating between two servers, we are bringing a mechanism to encrypt the data, and this application programming interface there will be some middle layer or middleware we call it, through which these interactions are happening. So for this middleware, we will be putting in various controls, the hardening of the system. There will also be application whitelisting which are still emerging. Then we will also be bringing in the contract aspects between these two entities. Okay, so that there are proper controls which are put in place in the respective entity also. Okay. We will be specifying some minimum the communication should happen in TLS 1.2 and above. These applications, APIs also will be audited for there will be code reviews and there will be the information security audit of these APIs, so that nothing untoward is there are no. So we will also be following the OWASP guidelines for this. Depending upon the nature of data that is being communicated between the, we will be following this OWASP guidelines. Similarly, you will be having some the mobile apps also. For mobile apps also will be bringing various controls. So overall, we will be looking at the API security. But these security solutions are still emerging. We will be doing it in pieces. Okay, we will be bringing in some application as the encryption part. We will be bringing in the legal certificate part. We will be bringing in the encryption part, like that. This will be disparate, but there are solutions emerging which will bring in a security for the entire ecosystem. Okay, but these are also to be reviewed from time to time. If there are some instances which are coming out, some frauds or something, corrective action is required immediately. So we will be looking at certain standards. That is why these standards are emerging. Okay. RBI also, see, when they speak about these security, they are also speaking about the API security to a limited extent, because those solutions are not available at present. They are still emerging. There will be some password protections also for this. Suppose if there are bots, there will be some protections for that. So the IP addresses will be whitelisted, the devices will be whitelisted. These are all the controls which are being taught in.
Right, Mr. Venkateswaran. Jatin, I'd like to move on to you, and thank you so much for being so patient. But you heard the views of all the gentlemen, Mr. Venkateswaran, Mr. Mishra, Mr. Deshpande, and also Mr. Belsekar. You heard them talk about the various threat vectors that they identify in their sector, within their subsector as well, and some of the solutions that they think could help them, fight some of these threat vectors. What are you seeing as some of the main attack vectors that are targeting the BFSI sector? And as Akamai tries to protect the entire ecosystem from cloud, apps, APIs, and users, how do you protect and deliver fast, frictionless, and secure digital experience for financial services companies?
Sure. No, thanks for that, Sneha. So I think you're right. And I think most of the panelists have covered it well. But just to bring it all together, the way we look at it is that there are three major areas where we are looking at bucketizing them to put in the right checks and balances. One is, of course, protecting your apps and APIs. Second is protecting your users and identities, right? And third is where you are talking about how to contain the attack surface itself, that even in a worst case scenario of things happening, how do you ensure that it's going in, right? So just a very quick view that when you're looking at apps and APIs today, interestingly, almost 80% of the requests which we see on the Akamai platform today are now APIs, right? So that is a prevalent one. It's an ecosystem where API is, the building block for FSI, fintech specifically as well. So it's very important to understand how do we discover the APIs which are there, because you can't control what you can't see, right? So it's important that you're able to have the right visibility on APIs and have the right profiling so that you can bring the right checks and balances, right? You also want to reduce the attack surface by saying, these are the certain locations or IPs or reputation-based scores which I don't want them to give access for. I want to do stuff like that, right? So that's some of the things. And then, of course, bringing in limiting, and as I said, OWASP 10, and a lot of other things which you can do to ensure protection. But what's also very important in this sector, which becomes, is that how do you ensure that we have a very least amount of false positive, which means a legitimate user in all these checks and balances is not getting impacted, right? Which is where it's important that you are able to identify and do a double click on any kind of attack vectors which you see. You do a risk profiling of sorts, right? And then take the action basis that. It's not one size fits all, right? We are talking about, in an old ideology, if someone is suspicious, seem to be entering a bank, right? The guard needs to be alerted. Okay, suddenly CCTV is in place, you do a metal detection and you say, okay, all clear. Then you go in and suddenly you see that there is some kind of further activities, you take a response basis that. So you have to bring in a lot of actions together in order to say, okay, now I can really categorize as an attack, or I can categorize as a risk vector or what, and then take the informed action accordingly. Right. So that's where you have to bring in an overarching strategy for your apps and APIs, because today, you're talking about acquiring customers digitally and serving them digitally. So you have to build in a good ecosystem around that. Now, when you're doing that, it's important that identities and specifically that part is taken well as well, for the simple reason that, again, majority of traffic today is bots. And that's not a bad bot always. A bot is not always a bad word, right? It's a very integral part of building a fintech or this thing as well. You could have SEO bots, you could have partner bots. So it's important that you, as one of the panelists mentioned, you have to identify whether it's a human or a bot, right? So there are various techniques which you use that. After you've done it, you have to categorize it, right? Whether it's a good bot, bad bot. If it is a good bot, what do I do? If it's a bad bot, what is it trying to do, and what actions you want to do? Because by design, when a bot, if you try to just stop or block a bot, it will mitigate it or do itself and come back in some other shape and form. So just blocking it or saying no to it is always not the best answer. So there are various different mitigation stages which you try to bring in, right? However, the other important aspect which we're seeing is that there's a massive increase in phishing, right? And all the panels agree that is the single biggest problem in this sector at this point of time. And to what another panelist mentioned about using a MFA, no doubt about it, right? It's an absolute must. But even MFA has to be non-phishable, right? So that's an important part. So using technique like FIDO2, where today we've seen that there's a lot of activity where they're trying to land you at a lookalike page, and they force you or they entice you into entering your credentials into a page, and that's where another way of stealing credentials is one. And so it's an overarching story about protecting your apps and APIs, protecting your users and identities, and how do you ensure that you're managing an entire phishing ecosystem, that how do you're able to give the right atmosphere for your customers to come and interact with you on.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Jatin. Mr. Belsekar, in the BFSI sector, you're a very process-driven industry and have a lot of customer data that you collect. So with data as your crown jewels, when you open up your channels for self-service and for digital interaction, digital transactions, how do you ensure that customers who normally choose convenience over security and invite risk, how do you ensure that their data remains safe and you have secure online channels, and how are you able to achieve that balance?
So first of all, we need to think about security and user experience trade-off between the two perspectives, technology and risk tolerance. From a technology perspective, we need to design systems and create user experience that obfuscate the security aspects from the users while maintaining the strict protocols in the background. For example, if someone is making a transactions on mobile, we can build a person screen interaction fingerprint, basically like the typing pattern, the screen clicks, etc. That is very specific to the user. The two-factor authentication is triggered only if the screen interaction or the fingerprint does not match with the actual user. So this way, we have a strict security protocol, but it's also not creating the friction in the user experience. The second would be the relax on the security for low impact transactions. For example, one-click pay for the transactions which are less than 500 or 100K of or 1,000, 10,000 of the amount, and progressively increase the friction only for the higher impact transactions. So we can quantify this using the ease of use versus the impact curve, I would recommend.
Correct, correct. Now, you raised a very interesting point, and I'd like to take it to Mr. Mishra. Mr. Mishra, Mr. Belsekar spoke about a very other next level of security measures that can be adopted. So instead of just using traditional ways of identifying a user through two-factor authentication, like SMS or email OTP, how are you looking at moving towards more stringent identity authentication measures, say voice biometrics, behavioral biometrics, like Mr. Belsekar spoke about?
Yeah, I mean that's an evolving area for sure, and there's a lot of innovation happening. There's a bunch of startups actually focusing on passwordless authentication, for example, right? I mean, you could see Microsoft, Google already leading the pack there with some variations of it in their latest editions, right, of the operating system. But I think it's the right direction, right? We cannot impose so much of a friction for the end user, and passwords, as we know, are prone to forgetfulness, easy to guess. It's a lot of issues. It's unfortunately the technology is not there to get rid of it today, and that's the easy low-hanging way to authenticate someone. But I'm expecting more and more innovation to happen through the phone itself, because the phone becomes your, like, more and more, if you look at an e-commerce or even a fintech application like ours, most of our business is running through the mobile phone, and thanks to, again, Apple and Google, there's lots of biometrics or other ways to authenticate using the device itself as a factor for authentication, if you will, right? So we don't have to actually wait for an OTP or an SMS to do that. And this is, again, all goes back to what data you're capturing about this device and about this user, and based on certain parameters you can actually authenticate or reject the identity of the individual entering your platform, right? I think that's pretty much the direction I would say we all have to go at some point in time.
Right, right. Mr. Venkateswaran, for public sector banks, digital inclusion is a key operational imperative where you try to reach out to hinterlands and Mofussil towns, but the cybersecurity awareness across these geographies and customer demographic profiles is quite low. So, what are you doing in terms of awareness creation and for your users to protect them against phishing attacks and ransomware attacks?
See, cyber awareness is required for everybody. Okay. One is at the top level, at the board. Okay. Then at the employee level and at the customer level. So we conduct various trainings to the employees, and we also bring in the booklets on cybersecurity glossary. Okay, we had released it recently, and we also conduct phishing exercises for our employees. Okay, we will send a phishing email and see how many people are clicking that email or acting on that email, and then we also train them, identify them and train them, so that the impact of any phishing attack is minimized. It's a regular exercise that is being done. There are also certain things like red team exercises which we are looking at, wherein we will be able to mimic the type of attacks, and then see the response to these attacks by the persons who are managing the operation. But still things are to evolve. IDRBT also conducts modules, cyber modules, wherein various banks participate on the modules. There are various scenarios that are created in a separate environment, and the response to these scenarios is also measured, and then corrective actions, whatever is required, are circulated to the people. This is one part. If you take the automation part for minimizing the incidents, there are also the source solutions of playbooks, which will help in reducing the turnaround time to act on the incidents. So One is there is a incident management mechanism. There will be there are certain dashboards which are to be created wherein we will see the security posture of the organization. Okay. And what are the emerging attacks which are happening. We also give circulars to the employees as regards various attacks or various incidents which are happening in other organizations also, and how we can prevent such impact on our organization. That is one part. The other part is for the customers, we always send SMS to them not to share their credentials. We will be popularizing through social media, through our websites, through some various television, some advertisements regarding that they should not share their personal identities or the credentials to anybody. Okay. So it's a regular exercise which has to be done, which has to be continued, and we will also be informing the customers as to what should be done if they notice a fraud or some transactions which they have not done. So we also popularize the cybercrime portal, okay, among our customers, and we also have interaction with the law enforcement agencies so that it's an ecosystem which has to be developed so that the frauds are minimized. We interact with the cyber ghost platforms, the government agencies on this who are working on this, so that we can minimize the impact of frauds. There are also we also take some cyber insurance, okay, so that the customers are compensated to some extent. But it all depends on the nature of transaction and whether it is reported properly in time. All these things are affected.
Right, right. Mr. Deshpande, how are you looking at the zero trust framework to help you preserve your customer privacy, customer credentials, and also to boost your cyber resilience?
So, though, like zero trust, nowadays everybody talk about zero trust. Okay. So what we do when you say zero trust, okay, we just ensure that whenever our users, maybe internal user or a customer, okay, who is accessing our application, okay, we ensure that he access only our application and not the internal network. Okay. So effectively, what is zero trust? Effectively, you every time
Trust
for
with
every
everything.
user and everywhere, you need to check the trust of that user who is trying to access your application. Okay. So the one thing which I told is that he access only our application. We ensure that he's not accessing our network. Second part is that the authentication. The authentication, okay, will be done for every transaction and every time he enters to our network. The third part, I'll say, whenever they access, okay, we ensure that they are connecting to our server in a secure way and through a secure device, so that to ensure that nothing gets compromised.
Right. Now, Jatin, just as the waterproof bulkheads in a submarine prevent the adjacent compartments from becoming flooded in the event of a hull breach, microsegmentation can contain the blast radius from a malware attack, dramatically limiting its lateral spread. How do you leverage this approach at Akamai to address the problem of malware proliferating across the enterprise via east-west movement?
Yeah, so I think, I'll just take it from what the before panelist was mentioning about it as well, that when you're talking about zero trust, it's not a technology, right? It's a journey. What you're trying to achieve as the end result, right? And when you look at it, you try to look at it in three main aspects, right? The first one is protecting your application access, which I think you covered pretty well, that you're talking about moving it from a network level to an application level, so that you do not have access to the entire network. Rather, it's only for the basis your identity what you can access, and that's the only thing which is you're getting access for. The second important aspect of that is that now that the perimeter has diminished and everyone is working from everywhere, the devices become very important, because even in case of you being a part of any kind of phishing or ransomware as a device getting infected, it cannot move on, right? So the recursive DNS part of it, that every request which is going out of the device is being inspected. And in case of a machine getting infected, you're able to identify and isolate that so that it's not propelling it further, right? However, there'll always be things which will go wrong. And in case of, either a ransomware or malware kind of a thing getting into the ecosystem or your infrastructure, so you protected your application to the user using the access and the threat detection part of it. However, the workload to workload, so that it doesn't propagate further once you get into it, right, is an equally important part of zero trust, right? Which is where I think the micro segmentation becomes very important. That one, how do you identify and categorize all your workloads? How do you bucketize them right? How do you ensure that they are categorized in such a way that even in one workload or one specific instance getting infected, it is not propagating it further, and you're able to contain, right? So you got the north-south and the east-west, both covered well, where you look at it. But as I said, right, it's a journey. And when you're looking at the entire thing, it starts from a user being aware to a device being protected, or a device, the right checks and balances being there. But the fundamental, most important part of all of this is visibility. Again, as I said earlier, you can only control what you can see. So it's important that whether all your applications, how are they, where are your users coming and accessing what, right? And how are all the workloads categorized and how they are interoperating with each other. The visibility across that in a single pane is the only way you can really move towards controlling and bringing the right checks and balances around it.
Right. Thank you so much, Jatin. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of this panel. I think in the time that we had, we tried to cover a lot of ground in terms of the threat vectors that you are seeing within your industry, the solutions that you think would help you, the approaches that you think would help you take your cybersecurity posture forward and prop it up. And I think we also spoke about some of the new approaches that we are seeing in terms of behavioral biometrics, in terms of a zero trust, and also a lot of other cyber remediation measures that we can take to prevent ourselves and protect ourselves from some of these cyber threats. Thank you so much for joining in today's conversation.